Hi, this is Lindsay, one of the co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Disarming Disability.
Hi, I'm Nicole Kelly, and I'm a speaker and an activist.
And hi, I'm Sarah Tuberty. I'm an occupational therapy student, a flight attendant, and an aerial artist.
We both live with a disability. We both were born with a congenital limb difference and are hosts of a new podcast, Disarming Disability, coming to you on Public House Media.
So come, learn, explore, and understand disability so we can deconstruct these social stigmas and really build a more inclusive society.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or at publichousemedia.org. Come hang out with us every Wednesday. Also follow us on Twitter at DisarmDisable, Instagram and Facebook at Disarming Disability, and check out our website at disarmingdisability.com.
Bye!
Welcome to another edition of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, the MLS is back, baby. But before that, we got the She Believes Cup, and we're going to do some CONCACAF Champions League. So very American-centric show.
You know, it can be, but it's more of the Americas, I think. Because, I mean, you got Brazil involved. You got an international tournament, a couple of international tournaments. So we're a little bit more diverse. I mean, at least by American standards. So,
oh, yeah. I'm just saying, it's touching a lot of America as we talk about everything on this show today. So welcome, guys. Hope you're all enjoying your afternoon, morning, night, whatever we're doing. But, yeah, that's what we're covering today.
So let's talk about something that I think the United States women's national team is not going to touch, and that's the She Believes Cup. With that was a good transition, Yvonne. I'm going to take it. But on day of recording is the last leg of the tournament. Basically, the tournament is just a round robin. Japan and England will face off. If there is a winner in that game, then the winner will take all. The United States and Brazil will be afterwards. The United States can only win if Japan and England tie, and they beat Brazil by 3. I believe. There's
3 or 2, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the score. If the United States wins 3-0, then they're set anyway. If the United States wins 2-0 and Japan and England go scoreless, then that's okay too. I highly doubt that Japan will be held scoreless in this game against England. I highly doubt that Japan will lose to England, kind of making the United States versus Brazil game absolutely worthless, with the exception of air quote heavy preparation for later on. It's been an interesting tournament so far. United States have 2 draws, both at 2-2. Including letting in a very late goal against Japan in the opening matchup on February 27th, and then having to actually come from behind after going down 2-1 with the Tobin Heath equalizer at the 67th minute to tie England. It's been kind of a weird and erratic tournament for the United States. What have your thoughts been, Yvonne? I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I think that the most pressing question I guess I get from this tournament is just kind of how off the defense kind of seems. There seems to be a big lack of cohesion and communication. And you see it with the last-minute goal that was scored against Japan. You saw it in the first goal against England where because of a miscommunication between the defense and the keeper on who should get it, there was a handball in the box by the U.S. goalkeeper, which led to an indirect free kick, which led to the England's opening goal. And just little things like that you don't expect from the number one ranked team in the world and from this U.S. team. And you just kind of don't expect these consistent brain farts at this level for a team of that quality. And I think that's the most worrying thing. And then I guess speaking in a larger overall theme of the U.S. so far in 2019, I mean, should we start hitting the panic button? Because they were completely outplayed in France earlier this year, and then were played very strongly by a Spain team, and now they've gone, which they won, but besides that, they've now drawn against two of the other favorites entering the World Cup, and is it time to really start wondering if the U.S. team might be able to defend their trophy? That's what I'm starting to get out of this tournament.
I think that's a fair statement, but I think the one saving grace is just how stupid these losses have been and stupid how these draws have been. I think the only game where they were actually outplayed was France. And that gives a little bit of hope because you're hoping that there's a mental click that will come about, that once these players are back at full swing, that once these a number of these players were down on injury against Spain, and they still beat Spain. And we have talked on the show in great length about how we think Spain is going to be the next powerhouse in women's soccer. So I see that there's reasons to panic, but I think the saving grace is that we're not getting outplayed so much as we are mentally taking ourselves out of the game. We're almost kind of falling into that Canada, New Zealand type approach where the United States is not mentally prepared enough for a game. Now, if that is an issue heading into the World Cup, that may be one thing, but I think that you have the ability to overcome those decisions knowing that your mental issues are a problem based on the professionalism that you have in this women's national team, the level of clout and prestige that you have on this women's national team. I think that you'll be able to overcome it.
See, and I guess my biggest fear is with this women's team because of this, just last year at the Men's World Cup, Germany came in not clicking either, and everyone's just like, oh, well, they'll figure it out. They're Germany. They'll figure it out. They're Germany. And then they didn't figure it out, and they got eliminated in the group stage. And I'm not saying the U.S. will get eliminated in the group stage, one, because the tournament setup kind of allows them to have a little bit more of a falling. If they struggle, it's okay to pick it back up because it's 24 teams. But when we expect at the U.S. team, which is semifinals, finals champions, they might not be mentally. My worries from Germany last year to maybe this team here is they get eliminated at the round of 16 or in the quarterfinals, which for them is hugely disappointing. So I think just because I saw this happen in Germany last year, this is why the red flags are waving a little more than what I would usually suspect.
Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Brice, Javon Sanchez, Carrasco talking the women's national team of the United States and their performance heading into the She Believes Cup. The thing is about this is that even if you're heading into the World Cup and you've got problems, that World Cup tournament stage is not going to be that difficult. When you look at who's in the United States World Cup groups or World Cup group, it is not the most difficult group in the world. I mean, you're looking at a number of teams that just kind of got in and auto-qualified. I mean, Sweden is obviously very difficult, and Sweden, I think, now that China's kind of declined a little bit, Sweden is the team that usually gets the United States GOAT. But Chile and Thailand are going to be easy opponents. They're going to be able to get past them to get that second spot. I don't think that there was ever any question that the United States was going to get out of the group. But even beforehand, if something went wrong with that heads-up game in Sweden, there was a chance that Sweden may have been able to grab the top spot in the group anyway. So the ability of the United States women's national team right now to mitigate their problems in such a long-standing process, I think, is very important because that gives the United States team a lot more time to figure this out and figure out, is it based on coming back from injuries? Is it from not having defensive cohesiveness? Is it because you've had such a very vocal aspect of having the goaltender spot being your weakest weakest position, and then now having the defense start to let their guard down and not be cohesive in front of her, causing some problems too. There's a number of issues that you can kind of tweak that out and work it out, and I think it will fix itself before it gets to the World Cup.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point with the goalkeeping issues, and part of the defensive lapses could be a lack of trust or a lack of belief they have in their goalkeeper to really know what she's doing when it comes to organizing a back line, when it comes to getting your defensive structure properly orchestrated and communicating. So that's something that actually could manifest itself later in tournament, though. As we look forward to the summer, we should keep an eye on. But also, you and I both made predictions, and we're both right. I think you picked Japan to win it, and they're looking pretty good to do that. And I picked Brazil to be disappointing, and they're looking pretty good to do that too. So look at us.
We can make it work all the way around. So
that's right.
All right. Let's change things up. Make sure that we get a chance to talk about CONCACAF Champions League. The quarterfinals will start again. Day of recording with day of release for the second half of the quarterfinal stage. New York Red Bulls, Atlanta United, and Sporting Kansas City and Houston Dynamo all moving in. So there's 4 and 4 between the MLS and Liga MX, which hasn't happened a number of times.
Well, actually, Independientes from Panama, and they're playing Sporting Kansas City.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, Kansas City eliminated Toluca from Mexico in the earlier round, but besides that, yeah, it's MLS. Liga MX for the most part.
I didn't realize that they made it through. I was kind of surprised by it. I know that there's a number of teams from the smaller leagues that I overlook, but yeah, out of the round of 16, the only team from the MLS that didn't make it was Toronto FC, and they were the team that lost to Independent. So it is an interesting setup. Your matchups for the quarterfinals: Santos Laguna against the New York Red Bulls, Houston Dynamo against Tigres, Monterrey will be going up against Atlanta United, and that independent team against Sporting Kansas City. What do you think is the most interesting matchup of this quarterfinal CONCACAF Champions League?
I think it's Atlanta United, Monterrey. You have Monterrey, who's still undefeated in Liga MX. I believe they're about 9 games in, and they're looking as strong as ever. Atlanta United coming off a title, new coach. They struggled away from home in the first leg and the last round. They picked it back up in the second leg. And we'll get to them later about their MLS weekend, but they didn't look overly convincing either. So, you have a Monterrey team who has a chance to really strike Atlanta before they're able to get things going with a new coach and trying to fit some new players in. And I think Santos Laguna and New York Red Bulls are interesting just because New York Red Bulls are an experienced team. They've struggled to kind of deliver in big matches, I think, when there's pressure on, when there's a trophy involved. And this is a very good quality side, Santos Laguna's team, too. So I think that one could be the most even matchup.
I want to give a little bit of credit to the Houston Dynamo and Tigres matchup, because while I know that Tigres probably will – statistically should probably win this matchup, Houston has done an amazing thing in tournaments lately. With their Lamar Hunt tournament push the last couple of years, with what they've been able to do when they've gotten in the playoffs over the last 3 years, this is a team that it kind of reminds me of that local beer league softball team that will lose almost all of their regular season games and then just demolish everybody in the tournament because they start paying attention to how the tournament rules go into effect. And and I think Houston Dynamo is in that boat. And so for them to go up against Tigres, I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. They've got some interesting challenges along the outside to really stretch the field and create some interesting opportunities that I don't think Tigres sees a whole lot. Now, Tigres has a lot of star power, but I think if Houston can control possession a little bit more, especially when working outside in, they're going to create a lot of opportunities that will be favorable in that offensive-defensive matchup against Tigres, and you could see them pulling away with a solid victory here and maybe even taking the whole the whole quarterfinal here as a route.
I can see them at home definitely being able to catch Tigres. Tigres have been known to kind of slip up away. I think the biggest problem the Dynamo will have, and I think MLS teams have in general, is traveling down to Mexico. Whether it's the conditions, whether it's just whatever it is, most teams tend to struggle down there. I would say Tigres probably will have a home field in both games. Monterrey's not that far off from Texas. You have a lot of immigrants from that state living in Texas, so it's going to be a very Tigres pro crowd even in Houston. And then the second leg, I mean, the El Volcán is one of the best home stadiums in Mexico and in North America. So I think Houston definitely needs to get a tie won't do it. They need to get a win at home if they want a chance to try to snag something on the return leg.
That does it for CONCACAF Champions Talk, as well as this opening segment here on Your Soccer Passport. We're going to take a break, and when we return, we'll come back with some MLS talk. The MLS season is here on Your Soccer Passport.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Just a reminder to check out our merchandise shop at tpublic.com. The best way to support Your Soccer Passport or any of the other wonderful shows on Public House Media is by buying a t-shirt, mugs, wall art, or more. That's all available at the TeePublic shop. That's teepublic.com/Public House Media. All right, we have now the MLS to talk about. Opening weekend, lots of fun stuff that ended up with half of the games ending in a draw. But it showed a lot of fun times with these games, and I could either go through all of them or I could suggest a couple for you. Well, how do you want to handle this one, Yvonne?
Suggest.
Okay, what did you think about 3 of the games having a red card in them?
Early season, trying to get your legs back into it. Sometimes maybe doing a little too much, just not getting the feel of it. I mean, the fact that Colorado got such an early one too, and that game was played in a humongous snowstorm. I think they said the coldest game in MLS history. That one's a little harder just because it was covered in snow, a lot going on, but. Yeah, I think it's like a sloppiness for early season, early season struggles.
Colorado, Houston, and Sporting KC all with those red cards, and Sporting KC was the only team to lose, losing 2-1 to LAFC in the week finale. Let's go to that Colorado game, though, with the snow, with the orange ball, with the cold games, and all that other kind of stuff. For that game to start off, I know that you're a Portland fan. I'm a Portland fan. There was some reminiscence of that U.S. Costa Rica World Cup qualifier that kind of came out a little bit too. Are snow games good for the MLS? Are snow games good for American soccer?
Probably not. I mean, no one's going to go to the games. This is kind of an example of why the MLS has the season structure the way they do, and why they don't have it to the European and Mexican calendar. It's because they don't want to play these games in the middle of January, February in the snow. And I think it's fun to see from your TV, but the quality goes down significantly, and the fans aren't there. And I don't think it's the best thing for MLS.
I think it's good occasionally, but I think that's a lot because you're pulling in on some of the old school football fans that remember big snow games like in Buffalo or Green Bay or something like that, and you can kind of see how the evolution of being a fan has changed in the United States. I think it's more of a cultural thing. To have at least one snow game a season, I think, would be a good thing, just because it's so wacky. But
Yeah, but you know what they never tell you about those snow games, like when you bring up like old football games, they never tell you that it was a great game. They just tell you that it was cold as F. That's all they tell you. They don't tell you that it was like well played.
The New England or Oakland playoff game with the snow, where Adam Vinatieri makes a tee out of snow beforehand, and his linemen are actually setting sweeping off and kicking away all the snow. That was the Tuck Rule game. That was one that you had. Also the Colts and Buffalo Bills. It was the terrible season for both franchises 3 years ago, and they had an amazing game in the snow. It was probably the only memorable moment of that terrible season for both teams. I mean, what I see, though, with this Colorado-Portland game, though, is that this was an opening matchup for Portland, who, man, they started off this season where they don't play the majority of their games at home until the second half of the season with renovations to Providence Park. So for them to start off with such a harsh condition game and then only pull out a tie despite going up against 10 men for the vast majority of the game really kind of shows some things about Portland, about how long this opening stretch of the season is going to be for them. I think that shows character and just kind of the difficulties of what Portland's going to have to face this season as they try to defend their Western Conference title.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heartbreaking draw for Portland, because Colorado tied it up in the 94th minute too. And you're right, they played their first 12 games on the road because of stadium expansion to Providence Park. And when you have a situation like this, when you're up 3-2 in the final minute, you have to close games out, especially because in the first half of the season you are expecting to be behind the ball because you're playing 12 games on the road. So this was 2 points lost for the Timbers, more than a point gained. And I think that's the most disappointing thing for the Timbers when you look at that, because points are going to be hard to come by in the first half of the season because of the stadium renovation and how wonky their schedule is. And, for them, I think they kind of hope to just kind of be in the middle of the pack. They can finish with 17 of their last 22 at home. But big opportunity lost here for the Timbers, I thought.
A new team in the MLS. Things didn't go quite as planned for FC Cincinnati, allowing 4 straight goals to end up losing after just a beautiful banger from Bertone at the 13th minute to get on the board. Problem was that they gave up 24 shots to just 7 taken, 9 of those on target for Seattle in the FC Cincinnati debut in MLS. What did you think of FC Cincinnati's performance in their opening game?
Oh, yeah, welcome to the MLS, man. Really tough first game. You have to go up to Seattle with the fans as passionate as they were. Good to see Jordan Morris get 2 goals and coming back from the injury that took him out all last year too. But yeah, it's going to be a learning process. We talked about last week how they didn't have the glitz and the glamour and all this kind of all this huge push that Atlanta did and LAFC did. And they're going to go through growing pains like this, and it's a good learning experience for them to start off against a team like Seattle. I don't know, what do you think? It just didn't look like a lot of things went well for them, and I think it's going to be what they're going to go through at times during the season.
I saw flashes of opportunity there, but nothing consistent, and it was really kind of a mixed bag on whether it was them not being a cohesive unit compared to Seattle pushing and doing things well defensively. This was a scheduling nightmare. I'm not sure why you would ever put a brand new team to start their season in Seattle. That just seems like a real boneheaded move by the schedule makers, especially when you could have put them in Columbus or something local. But it's your longest road trip, with the exception of Vancouver, which isn't that much of a difference. You're looking at a massive travel. Everything that could have happened wrong for FC Cincinnati in terms of what happened off the pitch could have happened. And I'm not willing to say that FC Cincinnati is going to have a bad season or that they're going to struggle quite like Minnesota United did when they made the jump, but there's lots of things here that FC Cincinnati needs to work on, and I'm not sure what they're going to really bring to the table when they get settled in, just because they look so inconsistent. Every minute they had a different product, and that's something to struggle with. Let's actually bounce over to Minnesota United. Minnesota United was a team that both of us thought were going to be much improved this season with some of the allocation money that they used and players that they brought in. They took a victory against Vancouver, actually being able to score 3 from Quintero, Calvo, and Ibarro to win 3-2 against the Whitecaps. It puts them up near the top of the Western standings, too, just because of that goal differential. Do you think that this is a sustainable model for Minnesota United, or is this going to be just a one-off game?
I think it'll probably be something in the middle. I think, we said they're going to be better in a very competitive West. I think it kind of puts, you're battling for kind of that 5-6 area. We talked about what teams would be disappointing. I'm not expecting much out of Vancouver this year. I thought they didn't have a good year last year, and I didn't see them making a lot of changes that would suggest that it's going to be much better this year, especially I think when you compare it to a team like San Jose, who's made vast improvements, who brings in a experienced coach and Almadea. And, if we quickly touch on them, even though they lost 2-1 to Monterrey, I saw more out of them in their loss than I saw from Vancouver when it comes to ideas and what they want to do with the ball. So I think this was Minnesota taking advantage of a team that's not probably as good as quality as them, and that's what good teams do. Though they go away and they pick up points against teams that might not be as strong as them, and they find a way to get victories. And these are the kind of results that Minnesota would not have had last year.
You brought up Vancouver. Let's keep a quick eye on that real fast. Out of the 3 Canadian teams, Toronto won 3-1, I think, in kind of a surprising victory against Philadelphia Union. Montreal also won 2-1 against San Jose. Montreal was that team that collapsed near the end of the season, allowing the DC United to slide into that final playoff spot in the East. With the 3 Canadian teams in the MLS this year, which one do you think is going to be the strongest?
I think Montreal. I think last year they kind of you said it was a collapse, but I think the quality is there. 2 years ago they were a playoff team as well, and I think they're just going to be the most consistent out of the 3. Toronto surprised me. Actually, yeah, you talk about a surprise. Toronto against Philly, you had them getting absolutely blown out in their Champions League match, and they were an abomination last year too. So for them to come out in Philly and get a result there, a playoff team last year in Philly, who bring in Marco Fabian, and Toronto really right from the gate kind of took it at them. So that was surprising. They have the quality, but can they have sustainability? I don't know. I think Montreal just a little more experienced and a little more consistent from the 3 Canadian teams. How about you?
I think Montreal is definitely the most consistent one. With how bad Toronto was last year, they didn't really do much to make me excited about what they could do now. It's frustrating that I see this matchup between these 3 Canadian teams, and even with the Canadian version of Lamar Hunt up there, they still struggled with teams like Ottawa. So it was not a good season for Toronto as a whole last year. And I'm really just so cautious on Toronto that I have to, I'm defaulted into Montreal, and I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's not the sexiest pick. I think just the high of the highs that Toronto had, and then the fall that they had the following year, last year. I think that's what makes it so, kind of head scratching. It's how does a team go so good to so bad without there being a huge overhaul in players or anything of that manner.
That just sounds like Toronto sports, in my opinion. I mean, it's happened with The Rock after they won back-to-back NLL titles, and then they went to worst in the league. You had the Blue Jays that made the playoffs all those years, and then they all just got old and couldn't make it as a group anymore without injecting new players. Raptors did that for a while back when they had Vince Carter, and then they lost Vince Carter, and then they just got trashy. So I mean, and let's not even talk about the Maple Leafs, because that we could be here for another 20 minutes on that. But when you look at Toronto sports, I think that's something that happens. It's one of the reasons why Toronto is such a fickle sports city, which does not help Toronto FC in the slightest. But even when you're looking at all that kind of stuff, they had the opportunity to make some splashes this offseason, and they didn't do it. And that's why I got to stick with Montreal.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, that will do it for this week on Your Soccer Passport. Yvonne, I know you do your shout-outs. What is your shout-out this week?
Sticking with the MLS, I'm going to go Efrain Alvarez, 16-year-old Mexican-American, debuted for the Galaxy, came in and had an assist, and then had another pretty little play that set up the Galaxy's second goal. So sticking with the theme of this week, I'm going with Efrain Alvarez, the 16-year-old Mexican-American who plays for the U17 Mexican national team.
Awesome. All right, well, that does it for us this week on Your Soccer Passport. I'm Brice Burge. He's Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Check us out on Twitter at Ivan Sanchez C90. I'm at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I. Until next time, you can hear us on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever your favorite podcasts are found. Have a good one.